This is Rich from richonmoney.com, and today I'm going to talk about the buy versus rent controversy. I'm going to give you 5 simple reasons not to buy your home, but to rent instead. All right, so let's dive into it. Let me give you those 5 reasons right now. Number 1, primary residences do not cash flow well. Number 2, when you pay rent, you don't have extra expenses on top of that. Number 3, there are several expenses that you pay on top of a mortgage. Number 4, mortgage paydown does not happen as fast as you might imagine. And number 5, you don't make as much as you think you will from appreciation. Those are the 5 reasons it's usually better to rent instead of buy, and we're going to talk about each one right now. Unfortunately, primary residences do not usually cash flow well. Most people, when they buy a primary residence, want a new house. They want to live in a nice neighborhood with low crime, great school districts. Perhaps they want to live in a high cost of living area. Maybe they want to live by a beach or a lake or a river. These attributes make the price to rent ratios way off. That makes it almost impossible to make any money or to cash flow on that property if and when you end up renting it out someday. Now, to understand why this is the case and why you can't cash flow well with a primary residence, it's necessary to understand the 1% rule. When you buy a property, ideally it will rent for 1% of the purchase price. Example, $100,000 house should rent for $1,000 a month, 1%. Now, if you buy a $100,000 house and it rents for $500 a month, you are not even close to the 1% rule. You buy a $100,000 house and it rents for $1,500 a month, you've exceeded the 1% rule, and that house will probably make money as a rental. I don't want to get into all the fancy math right now, but if something passes the 1% rule, it makes approximately a 6% ROI, or return on investment. Now, to illustrate why I wouldn't buy a primary residence, but I would rent instead, I'm going to talk about a personal experience from my own life, and it illustrates my point perfectly. We're going to apply the 1% rule to my life here in Montgomery, Alabama. Well, my wife decided where she wanted to live because of the school district. Well, the house to purchase there is about $190,000. With the 1% rule, you would want that to rent for at least $1,900 a month. Unfortunately, these houses rented for about $1,300 a month. So it did not pass the 1% rule and would probably not make a good investment. So we ended up renting that house. Now, a couple of miles away in a different neighborhood, you could buy a house at that time for $50,000. As long as a $50,000 house makes $500 a month, you've passed the 1% rule. Well, these were routinely renting for $800 or $900 a month. So they surpassed the 1% rule and they'd be good investments. So I bought these houses while living in Montgomery, Alabama as a military member. Bought houses in these neighborhoods and turned them into rentals, but rented the house that I was living in because I knew that when I moved away, it would not make a good cash flow. A good friend of mine once told me, when you pay rent, that is the most amount of money you need to pay every month. But when you pay a mortgage, that is the least amount of money you end up paying every month. Number 2 is rent doesn't have additional expenses on top of that. When you rent a property for $1,000 and the toilet starts leaking, you call the landlord. If the roof starts leaking, call the landlord. All the expenses that go with owning a house really fall on the landlord once you're paying rent. Now let's talk about number 3. When you have a mortgage, there's lots of other expenses to worry about. What about repairs? What about taxes? What about property insurance? What about HOA fees? What about something called capital expenditures, which means the expensive things on a house, like a roof or windows? I'm going to pause here to teach the 50% rule quickly, which goes along with the 1% rule. The 50% rule is when you're charging rent on a property that you own, approximately 50% of that rent will end up going to expenses. What does that mean for you? Let's say you own a house, the rent you get is $1,000 a month, but you've got a mortgage of $900 a month. That means you're cash flowing $100 a month, right? Wrong. So the 50% rule, that would be $500 of $1,000 of rent is expenses. So let's do this exercise. Your rent's $1,000, let's subtract our expenses of $500 a month, and then subtract the $900 mortgage. Ouch! We are seriously in negative territory here. That happens a lot with primary residences. And anytime you don't do some serious math, before you buy a rental property. I hope you guys are enjoying this video and it's helpful. If it is, please hit the like, subscribe to my channel, and when you do so, hit the bell for notifications. Leave me a comment letting me know where you are now and where you plan on investing next. Well, sure, Rich, rent is cheaper than a mortgage, but at least my tenant's paying my mortgage for me. Not so fast. It's not as awesome as you imagine. Number 4, mortgage paydown does not happen as fast as you would imagine. I'm going to get real techie here and show you an amortization table. This amortization table is a list of the monthly payments you make when you have a 30-year fixed loan, in this case for $100,000. The monthly payments are almost $600 a month. And if you look at the first payment on this chart, you'll notice that only $99.55 gets paid off of your actual loan on the first payment, and $500 of the payment is all going to paying interest. Let's fast forward a year into the future, and if you see on payment number 12, you still haven't gotten very far yet. Now, after 1 year, the amount of principal that's being paid with each payment has only went up by about $5. And it's $105.16 going towards principal, and still $494 and change all going to interest. Your very first payment is 84% interest, and it doesn't get much better for several years. What does that mean? That means that if you own a property for 5 years as a rental property and then go to sell it, and you check to see how much money your tenant has paid for you, you are going to be very disappointed. Surely by the time we're halfway through the loan at payment 180, things have gotten a lot better. Nope. At the halfway point, it's $243 going towards principal, but still $356 going towards interest. It's not even half and half yet. That's the way amortization works. You pay most of the interest at the beginning of the loan. And when I say beginning, I mean like beginning half. So if you bought a house that isn't going to cash flow well, which happens to be the case with primary homes, you're not going to be doing very well after 5 years. You probably would have been better renting the property that you loved and finding somewhere else to invest where you could get the cash flow that you needed. Buying, by no means, is clearly the better financial choice. Okay, Rich, I'll give you that, but my buddy bought a house in Honolulu, and a year later, he made $100,000 in equity. You know, those kind of jumps happen sometimes, but it's actually very rare. Appreciation is not as awesome as you think it is. Number 5 on my list, appreciation. Won't I make money from appreciation? It's going to be a lot less than you thought it would be. Over the past 100 years, the average appreciation in the United States is 3.1% per year. Inflation is about 3% a year. Appreciation keeps up or slightly outpaces inflation. It by no means makes you filthy rich. But what about what happened in Hawaii? Areas that are famous for appreciation, like Hawaii, San Francisco, New York, Washington, D.C. They're famous for appreciation because you might get a 10 or 20% jump in appreciation in 1 year. But then the problem is, over the long term, it still ends up averaging out to a very reasonable number, more like 3 or 4%. There are also places like Denver, Austin, Seattle, where there was massive appreciation over the period of several years. The problem is, nobody knows when those cities are going to appreciate and for how long. I say, take appreciation if you can get it, but buy for cash flow. I'm going to talk about the first house I ever bought in Alexandria, Virginia, which is right around Washington, D.C. I bought a townhouse in 2003 for $280,000. I thought it was the worst mistake of my life and that I was seriously overpaying for that property. Boy, was I wrong. About a year and a half later, that property went from $280,000 to $400,000. Whoa! Not so fast. I sold that house about 13 years later. What did I sell it for? Drum roll, big money, $400,000. So that house made 42%, but over 13 years, which ends up being a little bit over 3%, or essentially keeping up with inflation. What I realized from this property is 2 very important things. 1, the amount I made from appreciation was not very impressive. 2, the amount I made having this desirable house as a rental property was also very low, probably less than 4%. The house didn't cash flow well because it was in a high cost of living area. I can sum all this up for you in 1 sentence. I don't buy a house unless that house will cash flow well as a rental property, even if it's going to be my primary residence. There's 1 exception to that rule, but I just want to buy this house. Oh, okay then. But you realize it's not a great investment, right? I know it's not a great investment, but I like the feeling of owning my house. Now, okay, that's different. My exception to the rule of only buying when you're going to cash flow well as a rental is you understand that buying this house is not a great investment, but you still just want to buy. You want ownership. You want to make sure your landlord can't make you move. You want to make improvements to the property. You just want it to be yours. In that case, fine. Go for it. But don't kid yourself and try to convince me or anybody else that it's a great investment. Did you end up watching this far? Please hit that subscribe button for me. Hit the bell so you'll get notified when I make a new video. Give me a thumbs up. Tell me in the comments where you live now and where you're planning on investing in the future. This is Rich on Money, signing off.